Welcome to Supply Chain Unlocked, decoding operations automation in the future of global logistics. Let's get into it.
This is not a podcast about big vision statements, buzzwords, or what sounds good on LinkedIn. This is a straight talk conversation about how work actually gets done inside of real supply chain organizations. Today's episode is about something almost every operator feels, but very few leaders talk about honestly: generational management and remote work. Specifically where it works, where it absolutely doesn't, and why so many companies are struggling to bridge the gap. My guest today is Tom Brouillette. Tom and I worked at XPO GXO for a decade, back when supply chain leadership looked very different from what it does today. Since then, the workforce has changed, expectations have shifted, and technology, especially remote work and AI, has complicated how teams operate and how leaders lead. The goal of this conversation is simple: move past theory and talk about what actually works and clearly doesn't, and what leaders need to rethink if they want performance instead of friction. No hype, no ego, just execution. Tom, welcome to Supply Chain Unlocked.
Thanks, Teddy. It's good to be talking to you again. I appreciate it, and I appreciate your viewpoints as well, and I appreciate you inviting me to participate.
Yeah, so we're going to be covering a few different things or items, discussion points under generational management, and then get into remote work. Tom, what does generational management mean to you? When we brought it up in our pre-podcast, or over the years, I should say, what does it mean to you?
Well, one of the things I realized quite a while back is there truly is a difference. I identify two differences in people. One is related to the generational changes, and the other one is related to regional or cultural changes.
Oh, good point.
The two start playing together or working against each other almost, if you want to think about it. But they definitely do have an impact. In order to ensure or increase the likelihood of a positive experience, you must take that into account. There's different people act, react, and think in different ways. And a lot of this is generational. And I just, as an example, I just saw something this morning, actually, say in the heading, the title was, the difference between Gen X. And I thought, that's interesting. Well, Gen X is I get confused, honestly, but Gen X was born between 1965 and around 1980. And the interesting thing about that is that was the actual first generation where when you were a child going to school, you were pretty much left on your own. You would come home from school, whether you walked or got dropped off by a bus. You would be there. You would go home by yourself. You would go into your house by yourself. There would be nobody there, and you would fix yourself a snack and whatever else you did. You didn't have a lot of conversations. You didn't hang out so much with people, simply because of the situation. Your parents were worried about you being safe, and so you stayed in, and that was the agreement. And it dawned on me that the major difference between, let's say, Gen X and Gen Y was the entry of technology.
Yeah,
it's
good point.
Not that both parents stopped working after 1980. It's not that the mother was able to stay, or the father, a parent, was staying home with the kids. It's that there were different opportunities to entertain yourself and keep yourself busy. And if you think about it, the difference there is it's the beginning of the increase of impact of technology on the person, on who you are. And then as the generations progress, you get to the point where, as you become more proficient in the technologies and the capabilities are there, or you have different opportunities. Social networks have, became a huge thing. You would spend all of your time interacting with your friends, for instance, on Facebook or Snapchat or whatever it was. And if you follow the progress, if you follow the cycles through this technology growth, it kind of aligns with pre-technology psychology or the way kids grow up. One of the things that fascinated me was when my youngest would was on the forefront, it seemed to me, was on the forefront of new technology, new capabilities. When I started looking at Facebook, she was already 2 social networks ahead, if you know what I mean. Yeah. Oh, Facebook, Dad. Nobody's on Facebook anymore.
Dude, it's Instagram and Snap. Come on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, that's that's the thing. And maybe the most significant difference is the constant interaction, the constant ability to interact and respond and engage. And now you see, so you have a positive side and a negative side. The bullying would be the negative side. But the difference when I was growing up is the bullying would end when I went home. You know what I mean? It was just okay. I didn't have to worry about it. Now
Ah,
it is 24 hours.
that's a good point.
So how does that interact with your work environment? It's kind of important that you take that into account. People,
Well, as a manager, you got to understand that, right?
yeah,
And
exactly.
especially if you have multiple generations on your team or leadership, realizing who is in their 20s or 30s or 40s or what generation were they part of. And you
Mm-hmm.
have to be a good enough manager, in my opinion, to know your audience, be able to read the room
Yep.
and be able to communicate with them. If they're Gen Z, for instance, and anybody can comment on this, I will love to. And often as a project manager and program manager, I watch this go on in meetings where, from a Gen X perspective, texting and not paying attention and not looking at people in a meeting, whether it's on video or not, or physically, that is looked at as disrespectful in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And from a Gen Z perspective, if you're texting or taking notes,
Right.
on your computer, taking notes on your phone, everybody thinks you're texting and you're not engaged and all this. And you have to realize as a leader or a resource manager that you don't know what they're doing, and that's just what they do.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
so how do you work with them, and then how do you judge their performance? I think is a good discussion point.
I agree. Those are great questions because it cuts to the heart of the problem. Prior to this technology being available, in many ways, the measure of your work was being there during the workday, right? Now we should have been switched to the measure of your work as the results that you deliver. It doesn't matter to me where you do it. It doesn't matter to me when you do it. It matters to me that you get it done in the time frame that I need it done. So other people can do their work. And you have to start focusing in that way. And some people work differently. In it wasn't that long ago, I was involved in an initial proof of concept of work from home. And one of the things that we did was, we had a contract that we would sign, an agreement with the employees that they committed to being available during the normal business day. You don't do that anymore because people believe it kind of goes, you'll have a group of people that say, well, that should go without saying. And then you've got a group of younger people that have never experienced that. And they say, well, not in my opinion, not in my experience. I guess what it comes down to, the most important thing is the communication and the understanding. And understanding, how do you communicate? That's the thing, is understanding how to communicate to people, because different people think of it in different ways. In a previous life, built a on-call support team. So a break fix team. Anytime there were problems, it came to my team and we coordinated it. And we were also responsible for the release cycle. And what I realized was, prior to engaging with this, I had a theory that I needed to find the people that liked doing that work so that they would do more of it. And what I actually worked with somebody we were designing designing a warehouse management system. And this person did a great job at that, really was one of the most intelligent people I had worked with. But you know what? every month or two, he'd say, Tom, there's a problem here. I need to look at it. I need to help out with it. And what I discovered was it wasn't so much that the people couldn't do that. He definitely helped them, but it wasn't so much that they couldn't do that. He needed that feeling. He needed that sense of accomplishment of finishing something. And he told me that once. And so that kind of struck me. That always resonated with me. And I try to look at that from a generational management perspective as well. It's not, we are working with people all around the world. It doesn't matter. What matters is that we have a regular communication plan, and people will communicate better. You will see people, younger generation communicates much better through text. They won't call you on the phone.
Yeah,
So
and there's nothing wrong with that. You just got to know that, right?
You just have to accept it. Why should I force other people to bend to my idiosyncrasies?
Yeah, I mean, and that's a real good note. And I would add to it that in communication, from a project management perspective, and I've been a resource manager in the past. One of my mistakes when I was young, 24, 25, and I was an IT manager, didn't know anything, hadn't finished college yet. And my big mistake, and I see still being made today, is not communicating with your team and setting expectations. But I'm going to say something about expectations. The expectations, I don't think, should come with a hammer. And what I mean by that is I'm going to tell you so you can expect this. It's let's come to a departmental or a functional expectations that are negotiated that you can, so we're all on the same page, and that becomes multi-generational and accepted, negotiated, baited, whatever you want to call it, and then you move on from there. The reason I say that is so often I get into these project meetings and they go, what is the expectations? And I immediately jump in the middle and I say, that's what we're coming up with. And so I'm going to tie that back to resource managers, that you need to sit down and talk about how are we going to communicate that applies to everyone so it's more effective and efficient. Don't expect them to get it by osmosis, because your generation, I'm going to say my generation, Gen X, don't try to project my generational thinking upon my team, because it ain't going to work, or it's going to take so frickin' long for everybody to get it by osmosis. They're going to go do stuff on their own way. And dude, you're going to be months, if not years down the road before the whole team's clicking.
That is, I think of that as the rules of engagement.
Perfect. Keep going.
Let's define the rules of engagement as we're going through, because that will draw personality problems.
And you got to be clear about the rules of engagement that are debated. Is that where you're going?
That's it.
And agreed upon.
Right. When I say X, what does it mean to you? You used to call that team building, and it was more informal. It was becoming friends or colleagues. Now, because of the global nature of the workforce and how we do things, we compartmentalize everything. You really have to have clear handoffs, clear discussions. Think about this as, if you take a step back, it's a system and process integration challenge as well. I'll give you an example.
I feel like we're straying away, but go ahead.
So I'm just using it as an example. You're right. But if I implement SAP, I have a certain set of interfaces. And the standard practice was that I would write an interface for this process, an interface for this process to this individual system. If I was interfacing SAP to Manhattan WMS, I created 23 interfaces, and these were the formats, and I hardwired them into SAP, for instance. If I was doing Blue Yonder or any other one, I had different interfaces that I hardwired in. So that would be the generation 0 of your integration. We're at the point now where I need a translation. I need a translator. And if you think about this, we have entered into this of I guess the easiest way to think of it is we've entered into the age of startups where I need to be able to swap it out right away. I cannot afford to spend 6 months reintegrating a new solution because a startup, materializes and disappears in that time frame. And if you think about that from how you deal with people in team building, you need to do that as well. I have my own, in my pointed little head, interpretations of interactions with people. And you and I align those because we've worked with each other and we know how to deal with each other. We know that A means A, right?
Yeah.
But when somebody new comes in, we've got to relearn all of that stuff. So that's where that integration translator comes into play. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah. No,
At least
there's definitely.
that's what I'm thinking. So
Well,
now,
and if you bring, so would you bring? Go ahead.
so if you
Go ahead.
so we started dealing with new teams, new people being on our team, which is relatively straightforward because somebody would come to general practice, the general career model, if you will, was more focused on one company for a longer period of time, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, a lifetime. But that time frame has been shortening significantly over the years. And now we're at the point since the pandemic, I think it is, where 3 to 5 years is the average. 3 years is the average. 5 years is a long time. And so what that means is I've got to build that translation and that people translation engine, if you will,
Yeah.
to allow me to deal with different people more often and more often. And so that kind of coincides with this age of startups, if you will. And so that's what you got to start taking into account is just because it's the way I always did it doesn't mean it's the right way to do it. And it doesn't mean it's the way that is right for you. So we need to have that conversion, that translation in the middle so that we understand each other.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and realize that you need a translator when you bring a new person onto the team. And that new person, not to create biases or profiling by any means, but you realize what generation they're coming from.
It helps.
And maybe it's just my, I don't know, charismatic way of bringing people onto the team or starting out a project or working with new resource managers. It's really, you need somebody that's thinking in those transitory, get to know the people ways so you're productive, I think. That is just something that I think comes with time. And I'm going to make a note or a comment on charismatic. A big part of charismatic is care.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that you care and you portray that. And the second part that I'm going to bring us back to, because I want to get your thoughts on this. For the last 10 years, I've listened to creating boundaries. And when people use things about creating boundaries, and this, I think, speaks to generational thinking, mindset, or learned behaviors, so often people will say, you need to create boundaries. And my response to that in my mind and verbally at times is boundaries. Boundaries sounds like borders. Boundaries sounds like walls being put up. Take all those terms and put them aside for a second. Tom, if I set boundaries with you, they're not boundaries till we negotiate them and document them. In other words, we negotiate the boundaries. And if you just tell me your boundaries, or better yet, going back to my point before, if you put out a boundary or you're a resource manager and you don't communicate explicitly what that boundary is, nobody knows. They get it are they supposed to get it by osmosis? That's one. And then the second one is negotiation. It's got to be negotiated whether you guys agree to the boundary, because if all you're doing is calling out boundaries, now they become walls or borders, whatever you want to call it. And then the final one is to actually document it, because humans' memory become very flawed over time on what was agreed upon. And that comes into team building, that comes into being a good leader, a good manager, all of that stuff. Give me some of your thoughts. I'll be quiet.
I agree. My initial thought is that just the word boundaries is a negative word to me. And it is almost off-putting. It's like you stay there and I'll stay here. We have this handoff in between, but we're never together. You know what I mean? And I can't think of a good word for it, but it's more of an understanding. And maybe that's a better word. This is my understanding. This is how I work. How do you work? And now let's create a new work that includes both of us together.
Wow, that was profound right there. Let's create a new set of work that involves both of us. And I think that is where my term was negotiate. That there is a bound. It's not even a boundary at that point. It's a rules of engagement, like you're talking about, on how this works. And there's sort of guardrails on how we're going to walk down and work together, as opposed to boundaries and walls, right?
Exactly. But the hindrance, the thing that has a tendency to throw a monkey wrench in this whole machine is power and control. So if here's an example. When the pandemic, when we were at the height of the pandemic and we were doing the quarantine and it was all, we switched from a go into the office and work to work from home, that created a new dynamic, a new relationship, and it needed to be negotiated or understood and worked through. It requires a lot of communication up front. And the leadership, let's say, was forced into this because without it, they just weren't going to do anything. And now that the pandemic has passed, or the quarantine has passed, I should say, I guess, we see a growing practice of moving back to the office. And that is who was it? Was it Goldman? Was it the CEO of Goldman that said, if you're not coming into the office, I don't know if you're working. And my reaction to that attitude is, who the fuck gives a shit if
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And by the way, if anybody's listening to this, I allow swearing in politics, as long as we take both sides of the politics when we talk about it on this show, because that's what real operators do and talk about in the supply chain. So continue.
and so now we're struggling with this new reality where, I've got to go into the office. My son-in-law works for a software company here in Charlotte, a global company. His team,
let me guess. No, go ahead. I'm joking.
his team is, I don't want to say everywhere, but it's global except for Charlotte. He doesn't have anybody on his team in the Charlotte metropolitan area. He's got people on the team. He's got a team on in the Southwest Asia. He's got a team in the Philippines. He's got teams globally, but he doesn't have anybody here, especially in the Charlotte area. And yet, he's got to go into the office once a week.
All right, let me officially say we are moving towards the remote work side of this podcast or episode, because that makes me think about what I've been doing for the last 15 years, where there is this huge contradiction with leadership and the people that do the work. This has really got stirred up in the last 3 years. It's the call to go back to the office.
Exactly.
After the masses went on remote work, and the struggles that have happened, and I'll say on the retail side, for instance, the people that couldn't come into the office ever, and their complaint about how everybody else could work remote. That's a lot of where it started, and
Right.
We're going to get to the next thing. And if you've been in and around IT and many other things, there's been so many mergers and acquisitions. There's two of my large clients right now that they are dispersed all up and down the East Coast for one company, and the other one's all dispersed all up and down the West Coast. And very few people sit in the office well before the freaking pandemic, and we all got along. So the pandemic comes along, all of a sudden there's this mass remote work. 5 years later, we say, okay, get back in the office for these reasons, and the only real reason was so we can look at each other. And by the way, we're back to pre-pandemic, because everybody's all slung up and down the east or whatever coast, all over the place. On top of that, all over the globe is where I'm going. And then I'll send it back to you.
Right.
But that is how complex this has come. So it's always been remote work for the last 10 or 15 years because of mergers and acquisitions. And you could go back into the 90s and stuff. So it really gets into, now you got multi-generational engagement and how to manage and lead that team. And it's globally with remote work.
Hmm.
Let's start talking about truly like your son. He's the only dude
Yeah.
sitting in Charlotte.
Yeah. And as I've been thinking about this and as we've been talking about this and preparing for this, suddenly it dawned on me that the work location, the globalization is the same conversation as generational workforce. Some different terms, but you're doing the same conversation. And it's kind of mashing everything together when worlds collide, if you will. And that's where not only is it, so you've got to have rules of engagement when I'm talking to a recent college grad,
Good point. Keep going.
or if I'm talking to um, an engineer team in India. Give you an example. I was at Home Depot for a few years. And when I got there, Home Depot had outsourced its customer support team to India, a big partnership with TCS, one of the largest companies in the world, but they were the largest outsourcing company.
Customer support, are we talking IT or are we talking the
Command
consumer?
center support, consumer support.
Okay, keep going.
That initiative failed miserably, not because of the desire of the people involved. It was a cultural issue. The people in India, basically, to put it very simplistically, really didn't understand the concept of home improvement. If they wanted to paint their apartment, they hired somebody. If they wanted to do add a bathroom or a toilet, they hired somebody.
Oh my
If they
God.
were changing windows, they hired somebody because that was their culture.
Yeah.
You know, I went there and I was talking to somebody I went on a tour of Infosys, and they've got a big campus, really nice place. And one of the things that struck me was the day that we were there were about 4 or 5 men, and they were with shovels and picks, and they were digging a trench. And it took them all day. And I was watching them for a while intently, and one of the people from Infosys came over and he said, what are you looking at? And I explained to him, and I said, in the US for a job like that, we have equipment. We have a backhoe, and it takes us 20 minutes to do it. His response was, it was really earth-shaking for me, from my perspective. He said, Tom, you don't understand. That piece of equipment basically costs the annual salary of all those people doing the work today. It's not cost effective to replace people like that with equipment. The equipment's too expensive. So if you don't have a concept, I'll expand that. If you don't have a concept of what home improvement is because you never do it, how are you going to support the U.S. consumer with questions?
Yeah, that's a very good question.
And that gets to the point of the importance of figuring out what people are good at or what people are understand, and give them a job that requires that, rather than forcing them to learn something that's at odds with the way they've grown up.
So, speaking of that, there's been a few times where I rented out my house in North Carolina. I started some real estate investing, and specifically for executives. And a guy, last name's Kumar, I can't think of his first name, but came from India, and they wanted to rent the house. And I hate realtors getting in my way. So I just said, the realtors can come, but I want to meet the couple, and let's do something. And we walked outside, and we both agreed that we just need to come to a price because I really liked them.
Yeah.
And we walk outside, and him and his wife look at me because it was my personal house, that particular one was. And I had all kinds of tools and stuff to maintain the yard and a riding lawnmower and yada, yada, yada. And she looked at me, and then he looked at me, and they go, why do you have all those tools and a riding lawnmower? And I said, I can leave that for you so you can cut the lawn yourself, weed eat yourself, and fix anything you want. And they go, you don't fix everything? And I go, well, hopefully you're not breaking everything so I don't have to have it fixed. And I said, there's a certain point when you'll have to, you keep breaking stuff. I'm not going to just fix that because that's just how we operate. This is a relationship between us, and it's always quicker if you just pick up some of the tools that I leave here, you can use them. And she laughed. She was just like, we don't know how to use tools. And then I've been working for 20 years with offshore people, but I never got into a discussion like this.
Yep.
And it wasn't like they were trying to demean me or me them. It was just something that was a great eye-opening conversation that we were sitting there. And then we all laughed at each other, but we had an understanding, and there was a rules of engagement. And here's where this was they agreed that they didn't need all the tools, so a bunch of stuff went into storage, and then we agreed upon this. I would give the husband as a housewarming gift when they moved in, and it would be his for life, was a ladder.
Mm-hmm.
One of my 3 ladders, because she felt like he needed that because he's never had a ladder before.
Yeah.
And it was and we became friends, and we used to go out to dinner once with my wife and them once a month. But it's to your point is we came up with a set of rules of engagement right after that conversation.
Right.
We realized the differences of the culture, and that's really plays into all of your points that when you know that, and those, I don't even want to even call that complex. It's so simple. Leadership and management need to understand that with teams.
Yeah.
And then when it gets to remote work, here's where I'm going with remote work or staying on that subject. We had some real problems that first year with so many people being remote. They were remote before, by the way. Per se, they were in the office, but they were remote to me as the program manager and their resource manager. Nobody on the teams that I was working with sat next. They were not in the same city as their
Really
resource
sat next
manager.
to each other or engaged with each other. There was no personal or face-to-face relationship.
Yeah, and it became this whole I don't know what to do suddenly, and it was like nothing's changed in their relationship. Why are you saying this? And then the new people that came on, and where it started from was we had a few new people come on during the early part of the pandemic that was coming back and saying, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to get started. And I would sit down with resource managers and say, what's the training material? Do we have a set of policies or procedures that we've taught them for the new people?
Right.
And the resource manager's point was multiple ones were, hey, they need to just sit with the other tenured folks and learn that. And I'm like, is it documented for them to be taught? So there's a curriculum,
Do they have a reference?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and what the reality was, no. And it was
Right.
this resource manager delegation thing going on of saying, you go work with the new people. And then it just unraveled from there because it all started with new people saying, I don't even know where to get started. The delegation of a resource manager saying, you guys go teach them. And the teachers or trainers didn't have anything to go on.
Yeah. And here's another interesting twist to that. When you begin, everything is wonderful, everybody's new, and you're all together and you're learning how to work, and you have your procedures, and if you have a question, you know who to go to. As the project progresses and life happens and changes occur and priorities change, problems come about, you start to get to the point where the fact that somebody might not understand how to do a particular thing becomes more impactful. And if you haven't spent the time early on to get that squared away, what I've seen happen more often than not is, well, okay, forget it. I'll get Tom to do it because he's done it before. You do something else. And then the next question is, well, what will I do that I don't need help with?
And how do you handle that in a remote setting?
Yep.
And my answer is there's got to be rules set, especially especially in remote work. Being on video, it's more engaging, it's more understanding. You know that people aren't walking through Best Buy trying to listen to conference calls or buying a lawnmower at Home Depot while they're trying to listen to a conference call. They're never getting up to speed because they're wandering around. But that is what leadership, that is clearly a failure in leadership and or management because they're allowing people to work remotely. And when I mean remote, I'm talking remotely for people that are in office that aren't physically with anybody on the team, that they just allow the whole no video thing. And I just find the people that are on the videos are much more engaged. There's much more rapport. There's much more team building, chemistry, etc. for the people that get on camera and stay on camera. So that comes down to a rule of engagement.
Exactly. Well, and generating a level of interest.
Yes. I mean, well, you naturally get a level of interest when you're engaged
Yeah.
and you know what rules you
Exactly.
got to abide by.
Exactly. So you've got to get over that hump of the ability to go to Home Depot for a tool, or to go to the Kroger for groceries while you're on well, I'm just on a conference call. I can do this, and you're
Yeah.
really not engaged. You're really not participating. So that's the challenge. And now, to tie it all back in a nice little bow, that's where the senior leadership of a company comes in and says, well, if all these people were in the office, we wouldn't have this problem. It's not that they wouldn't be, it's not that coming to the office makes them engaged. It's not that coming to the office makes them train each other to be able to do the activities. It's that coming into the office, I can see them.
Yeah.
And what that translates to is a level of trust. To if I am forced to go into an office simply so that senior leadership can see me sitting there, to me, it's a level of trust. That starts to that builds a poisonous environment.
You're right, because I feel that leadership doesn't trust me.
Yep. So screw you. What do I care? You don't trust me. And the other interesting thing, without realizing it, you're reducing the capacity of output, because when you force people to be together, there's a higher likelihood that they're going to get up and walk around and talk to somebody, or go to the coffee room and have coffee and talk to somebody, or, whereas when you're at home, I may go to the grocery store for a conference room during a conference call, but I am getting my work done because it passes the time of day almost, and I'm engaged in it.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know what, I was looking up here. Sorry if my head's swinging to the big monitor and back. I was looking for it's a picture or a diagram of the cost to an employee of going from remote work to being forced back in the office. And I shouldn't use forced back in the office. There's a rule of engagement, right? You got to go back to the office.
Yep.
But what is not talked about a lot, that I don't think a lot of people realize, when you go from remote to back in the office, you got wear and tear on your car at 72 cents a mile that the IRS recognizes, and then the time. And let's just say your commute in general is 30 to 45 minutes. That's at a minimum, and that's probably low for a lot of people. So let's make it 45 minutes. I know most people are commuting between 30 minutes and an hour, so call it 45 minutes. That's an hour and a half of unproductive time that's costing the employee. And if you are an employee and you treat your career like a business, that is eating away at your net profit. Why do I bring that up? If you look at those time, and you just say you're paying yourself $50 an hour, that means an hour and a half of your day, $150 of your time is lost profit. Before you look at your mileage at 72 cents a mile each way, and let's just say it's 15 miles each way. And that's just on the simple side of math that it's costing you. Now you begin to, once you start seeing the real cost to you as the employee, and you're having to go into the office that has no real seeable benefit, or leadership communicating the benefits to you, the audience, that really degrades in the relationship already, because leadership didn't show the benefit to you of the benefit to you in the office.
Right.
And I think those are items or variables that they don't want to talk about, or employees don't calculate into their current. If you're a remote worker now, they don't calculate that when they go take another job, unless they're unemployed, something like that. That's a different conversation.
Right.
But yeah, and I think I don't mean to stray off into something else, but I think that a lot more people, or leadership, if they would start communicating more the benefits, they would build on the trust and the reasoning to come in the office, and it would fulfill people more, and they'd be much more engaged to come in the office.
There's, and this is where the generational impact comes into play as well. Because my generation, your generation, had this career expectation, and we wanted to grow in our career, and we wanted to do this and do that. And now you get to the latest generation, whatever the hell it is, and they look at work as a way to do what they really want to do. I need to make X in order to be able to do what I really enjoy, which is Y. It has nothing to do with X. X doesn't define me. Y defines me. And so, you come back to the point where they could be perfectly happy doing the same thing day in, day out. You have to take that into account and not assume that everybody's like you. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, that's a real good point. When you assume people are like you, speaking in generational terms, I think that's the beginning of a bad situation. Anyhow.
Yep.
I
It's the
agree with
beginning
that.
of walls and conflict.
Yeah, no, that is exactly what it is. And then it just deteriorates from there. And I think we covered what was on our agenda,
Right.
the trust and accountability and visibility piece. One thing that comes up often is how older leaders define accountability versus how younger workers experience it. And that really speaks to what you were talking about.
Yeah.
The other part is,
And you know what?
is why
That is, if
our,
you take a
go
look
ahead.
in, I'm going to throw in the agile concept. Now, I understand it. Think it's a good development, but I don't think it's the end all be all. But the practices are very strong for especially a remote team. Because what you do is, right, the concept of agile is I do a 20-minute or 30-minute stand up every day. And I go along and it's like, okay, you're working on this. Are you on schedule? Yes. Do you need anything to maintain that? No. Okay, next. What else is going on? Do we have the things? Do you have the things that you need in order to start your next task, kind of a thing? You're talking about that. So that practice, that method can go a long way to helping generations work together and people to work remotely. It eliminates the need to be physically together, in my opinion.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I'm looking through all of our other agenda items here. I think we're going to break this into 2 episodes because we get into other things that I think are very thought-provoking. And by the way, I did invite Damon Cassidy that started this whole conversation after
Good.
watching his video. And hopefully he'll respond because he's younger than us and he had a good way of articulating both sides of this. The other one that has a good way of talking about this is a new podcast or YouTube channel out there, Asian Dad Energy. Dude's hilarious. And he was on Damon Cassidy's video as well. And for the listeners, I'll put both of these YouTube channels in the description so you can look them up.
Yeah, I think after about an hour, it's time for us to kind of recoup and go back and say and align what we talked about to what we thought we would talk about.
Yeah, so let's go and start landing the plane. Any final thoughts that you have, Tom? You're exhausted.
I am a bit of instant gratification. I have a tendency to blurt it out.
Yeah, we all do. We all do when we let you just talk and don't put a bunch of boundaries around what you can talk
Exactly.
about. Don't worry, you won't get canceled on this channel.
Okay, I appreciate that.
All right, to the audience, landing this plane, we really appreciate your time. I think we had some good, thought-provoking, value-packed conversation, Tom and I. We appreciate your time if you made it to the end of the video. We certainly hope that you'll subscribe, maybe give us a thumbs up as well, and some comments or feedback down in the comments. So with that said, thank you for your time and have a good day. Tom, let me stop the okay.
Welcome to Supply Chain Unlocked, decoding operations automation in the future of global logistics. Let's get into it.